In the world of human relationships, few things are as confusing, frustrating, and fascinating as the games people play in love. And when it comes to women, the games they play can often feel like puzzles without answers. But here's the truth. These games are not random. They are strategies, sometimes unconscious, sometimes deliberate, that test a man's patience, his confidence, and his self-control. Most men lose because they don't even realize they're in a game until it's already too late. Byung-Chul Han, one of the most influential modern philosophers, often speaks about how our society is shaped by invisible forces of desire, attention, and power. In his view, modern life is a constant competition for recognition, and relationships are no exception. A woman's games are not simply about fun. They are often about testing your value, your strength, and whether you can hold your frame under pressure. One of the oldest and most common games a woman will play is the game of silence. She pulls back. She stops texting. She ignores your calls. She creates distance where there was once attention. For most men, this feels unbearable. They panic. They overthink. They start chasing, sending double texts, apologizing for things they didn't even do, and begging for her attention back. And just like that, she wins. But here's the deeper meaning behind this silence. Byung-Chul Han explains that in a society overflowing with noise and information, silence itself becomes power. Whoever can withhold attention controls the dynamic. A woman knows that silence unsettles you. It creates a void, and your instinct is to fill it. The way to win this game is not by fighting the silence, but by mastering it yourself. When she pulls back, you don't chase. When she becomes quiet, you become quieter. When she creates space, you expand into that space with your own life, your own goals, your own sense of purpose. Byung-Chul Han warns us that modern men have become addicted to immediate validation, to the dopamine rush of constant replies and attention. But the man who can detach, who can endure the discomfort of silence without reacting, shows immense strength. And in relationships, this strength is magnetic. Think about it. When you do not react to her silence, you show her two things. First, that you are not emotionally dependent on her responses, and second, that you have enough discipline to remain calm under pressure. Silence, then, is not something to fear. It is something to embrace, because it becomes the stage where your patience and self-control are displayed. In fact, the less you react, the more she begins to break her own silence. Why? Because the power of silence only works if the other person is desperate to end it. If you are not desperate, if you remain composed, she will eventually feel compelled to re-engage. That is how you win this game. Part 2. The game of jealousy. The second major game women often play is the game of jealousy. This can take many forms. She mentions another guy, she flirts lightly with someone in front of you, or she talks about how much attention she gets from men. At first glance, it feels cruel or manipulative, but in reality, it's a test. Byung-Chul Han often speaks about the psychopolitics of desire, how power is exercised not through force, but through subtle manipulation of emotions. Jealousy is one of the most powerful tools in this arena because it destabilizes your mind. It makes you compare yourself, doubt yourself, and act irrationally. And the moment you fall into that trap, she gains control. Most men fail this test by becoming insecure. They start questioning her, interrogating her, or trying to prove that they're better than the other men she talks about. But the moment you do that, you show weakness. You show that your sense of worth depends on her approval. And once she sees that, she knows she can control you with ease. The way to win the jealousy game is by practicing detached confidence. When she tries to make you jealous, you don't argue, you don't compete, you don't beg for reassurance. You simply remain calm, collected, and even slightly amused. Why? Because her attempt at making you jealous only works if you take the bait. Byung-Chul Han's philosophy reminds us that modern life conditions us to always compare ourselves, to seek validation by measuring ourselves against others. But this is a prison of the mind. The man who breaks free from comparison gains freedom. So when she plays jealousy games, your response should be rooted in self-assurance. You know who you are. You know your value. You are not shaken by the presence of other men. Ironically, when you remain calm in the face of jealousy, it flips the script entirely. Instead of you chasing her approval, she begins to chase yours. She realizes her attempts to provoke you don't work, and this makes you more intriguing, more mysterious, and ultimately, more attractive. Winning the game of jealousy, then, is not about fighting fire with fire. It's about refusing to play on her terms. When you hold your ground and remain unfazed, you demonstrate a rare kind of strength that most men lack. And in the end, that strength makes you the prize. Another powerful game women sometimes use is the game of emotional storms. Sudden anger, tears, accusations, or dramatic reactions. This isn't always conscious manipulation. Sometimes it's a test of your emotional stability. She wants to know. Will you lose control when she does? Will you mirror her chaos, or will you remain grounded? Byung-Chul Han discusses how modern culture is saturated with emotional intensity. In a world where people constantly seek to stand out, emotional extremes often become a tool of influence. And in relationships, emotions can easily become weapons. A sudden outburst can destabilize you, forcing you into defense mode. Once you lose composure, she gains control of the situation. Most men make two mistakes when faced with a woman's emotional storm. The first is to fight back with equal force, arguing, shouting, or trying to dominate the chaos with their own anger. The second is to collapse entirely, apologizing endlessly, surrendering just to stop the storm. Both of these reactions prove the test correct. You are reactive, not centered. The way to win this game is by mastering what the Stoics, and Byung-Chul Han in his critique of modern society, both emphasize: the art of calm presence. You do not fight the storm. You do not surrender to it. You stand firm like a rock in the middle of crashing waves. You acknowledge her feelings, but you do not let them dictate your state of mind. Here's the paradox. When you do not mirror her chaos, the chaos eventually burns out. A storm cannot last forever without fuel. By staying calm, you deny it oxygen. Over time, she realizes that no matter how intense her emotions, you remain unshaken. And this steadiness is deeply attractive because it signals strength. Byung-Chul Han would say that in an age where emotional overexposure dominates, the man who maintains composure is rare, and rarity is power. Most men will always react, always break under pressure. But the few who remain calm stand apart as leaders, as protectors, as men who cannot be swayed by fleeting storms. Winning this game, then, is not about overpowering her emotions. It is about being the steady center when everything else is unstable. And once she sees that, she knows you are not just another man. She knows you are built differently. Part 5. The game of withholding validation. Perhaps the most subtle yet effective game women play is the withholding of validation. She compliments you less, ignores your achievements, or downplays your efforts. This can make even confident men second-guess themselves. Human beings are wired to crave acknowledgement, and women instinctively know that by withholding it, they can make you chase harder. Byung-Chul Han explains that modern society is built on the economy of recognition. Social media likes, comments, and digital validation shape our sense of worth. But this has made men weaker, more dependent on external approval. When a woman withholds validation, she is tapping into this vulnerability, seeing if your self-esteem collapses without her praise. Most men fail here by overcompensating. They brag, they seek reassurance, or they beg for compliments in subtle ways, but this only reinforces her control. She sees that her approval is your fuel, and once she realizes this, she can withhold it endlessly to keep you chasing. The way to win is simple, though not easy. Become your own source of validation. Your sense of worth must come from your actions, your discipline, and your mission, not from whether she praises you or not. When she withholds compliments, you do not chase them. When she ignores your achievements, you do not try to impress her harder. You simply remain grounded in the knowledge that your value is not negotiable. Byung-Chul Han argues that true freedom in the modern world comes when we detach from external recognition. This is especially true in relationships. The man who does not rely on her validation becomes powerful because he cannot be controlled by praise or its absence. Ironically, when you stop seeking her validation, she is far more likely to give it. Why? Because withholding validation only works if you need it. Once you no longer depend on it, she loses the leverage, and often, she will begin to respect and admire you even more. Winning this game means mastering the art of self-worth. When BTU, your value comes from within, no amount of silence, withholding, or dismissal can shake you, and that is what makes you unstoppable. Another game women often play is the game of comparison. She might compare you to an ex, to her father, to her male friends, or even to the idealized men she sees online. Sometimes it's subtle, like, he always pays attention to details, or other men don't get upset about this. Other times it's direct, why can't you be more like him? This game is dangerous because comparison cuts deep. It attacks your sense of uniqueness, making you feel as though you are replaceable. And when a man begins to believe he is replaceable, he loses his power. He begins trying to compete with invisible rivals, molding himself into someone he is not, simply to earn approval. Byung-Chul Han often talks about how modern society is plagued by the tyranny of comparison. Social media ensures that we are constantly measuring ourselves against others, other men, other lifestyles, other standards of success. Women instinctively know how powerful this comparison trap can be, and when they play this game, they are probing to see whether you truly stand firm in your identity. Most men react poorly. They either grow defensive, trying to prove themselves, or they fall into self-doubt, questioning whether they are enough. But the truth is, both of these reactions give away power. The way to win the game of comparison is simple. Refuse to participate. When she compares you to another man, you do not defend yourself and you do not attack the rival. Instead, you remain grounded in who you are. You know your strengths, your values, and your path. You understand that no comparison can define you, because you are not in competition with anyone else. Here's the paradox. The less you care about comparison, the more irreplaceable you become. Byung-Chul Han would argue that the man who escapes the prison of comparison becomes free in a way that few men ever are, and freedom in itself is magnetic. Women may test you with comparison, but when they see you are unshaken, their respect for you grows. Winning this game is not about being better than other men. It's about refusing to measure yourself against them at all. When you live by your own standards, no comparison can touch you. Part 7. The game of testing boundaries. The final and perhaps most important game women play is the game of boundaries. She may test you by pushing your limits, canceling plans at the last minute, demanding more of your time, disrespecting your values, or seeing how far she can go before you push back. Why does she do this? Because boundaries reveal the core of a man's strength. If you allow them to be crossed without resistance, you show that your principles are weak. If you enforce them calmly and consistently, you show that you are a man who cannot be controlled. Byung-Chul Han explains that in today's culture of overexposure and unlimited demands, the ability to say no has become rare. We are conditioned to always be available, always be responsive, always bend. But in relationships, a man without boundaries is like a fortress without walls. Anyone can enter and reshape him. Most men fail this test by either being too rigid or too soft. The overly rigid man enforces boundaries harshly, with anger or coldness, turning them into weapons rather than principles. The overly soft man avoids confrontation, allowing his boundaries to be eroded until he no longer has a sense of self. The way to win this game is balance. You must enforce your boundaries with calm strength. If she disrespects your time, you address it directly, without anger but with firmness. If she pushes against your values, you stand your ground, not in arrogance, but in quiet certainty. Byung-Chul Han would say that boundaries are what preserve the dignity of the self in a society that constantly seeks to dissolve it. And in relationships, boundaries preserve respect. A woman may not admit it openly, but when you enforce boundaries with strength and calmness, she feels safer with you. She knows you are not a man who can be manipulated or broken. Winning this game is not about control. It's about self-respect. When you respect yourself enough to enforce your boundaries, others will respect you too. Ending. So let's bring it all together. Women may play games: silence, jealousy, mixed signals, emotional storms, withholding validation, comparison, and boundary tests. These are not random acts. They are strategies, conscious or unconscious, designed to reveal the truth about who you are. And here's the reality. Most men lose because they react instead of respond. They panic instead of remain calm. They chase instead of stand firm. But you are not most men. By studying the wisdom of philosophers like Byung-Chul Han, you begin to see the deeper pattern. In every game, the real question is the same. Are you in control of yourself? Because the man who cannot control himself will always be controlled by others. But the man who masters silence, who refuses to be shaken by jealousy, who stays calm in emotional storms, who lives without craving validation, who rejects comparison, and who enforces boundaries with dignity, that man cannot be defeated. Byung-Chul Han teaches us that modern life tries to enslave us with constant pressures for recognition, for attention, for reaction. The same is true in relationships. But when you resist these traps, you step into a different kind of power. You stop being the one who plays by her rules, and instead, you become the man who sets the tone. And here's the final truth. Women respect, admire, and desire the man who cannot be moved by games. Not because he is cold, but because he is strong. Not because he is detached, but because he is centered. So when a woman plays these 5, 6, or 7 games, the way you win is not by outplaying her. It's by refusing to play at all. You win by living with strength, calmness, and self-respect. That is how you transform the entire dynamic. That is how you rise above the games.